Hello everyone, this is Coach B with MasterChess.com, and in this video we're going to go over the Philidor Defense. In this position it's black to move and we're going to be fighting for a draw. There are different ways to defend here, but I'm going to go over the Philidor Defense because it's very easy to learn and it's very easy to apply in most of the games. If you get your king in front of the pawn, you are halfway to a draw. So the correct play here is rook to g6. What this move does is preventing white from coming with the king in front of the pawn, which is his favorable position to win. And now all black has to do is not let the white king come in front of the pawn and keep the rook on the 6th rank. If white tries to check the black king, let's say rook to a8 check, the black king will simply move up to e7. After rook to a7 check, the king will just go back. So all the king has to do is just move up and down. So here, eventually, white will have to push the pawn. And after white pushes the pawn and the pawn is in front of the king, well, now black has enough time to retreat the rook and a series of checks will come that white will not be able to prevent and will not be able to stop. After this, if the king moves to d6 and trying to checkmate on the next move, well, now it's black to move and black will just start a series of check. Rook will come to d1 check, king to e5, rook to e1 check, king to f6, rook to f1 check. And white cannot get away from the checks. After something like king to g5, rook to g1 check. King to f4, the rook could come behind the pawn as the white king is not defending it anymore. And if the rook defends the pawn, let's say rook to a6, the king will come to e7. After something like king to f5, rook to f1 check, the white king has to move away. Rook to g1 check, king to f4, and we could come behind the pawn or check the king. White cannot make any progress, and this is a drawn position. Now coming back from the beginning, let's see what happens if black plays carelessly. Let's say he moves the rook to g1 here. Well, now white is winning this game. He's going to move the king to d6, and here, no matter what black plays, this game will be winning for white. If black is going with the rook to d1 check, white will be able to move in front of the pawn, sheltering from the checks, also threatening rook to a8 checkmate. So here black has two ways to play. First way is to block the checkmate with rook to d8, but after this white will simply swing the rook over on the other side. And now the only move to prevent checkmate is to move the king away, king to f8, after which white will come with the rook to h8 check, and now the black king is forced out and white will be able to win the rook and win the game from here. And coming back, if black, instead of moving the rook to d8 to shelter from the checks, he's trying to move the king out, let's say king to f8, to prevent checkmate from happening. From here, white will continue with rook to a8 check, forcing the black king out to g7. Now the white king will move to e7. If the rook comes behind the pawn attacking it, the pawn will simply push to e6. And the black king doesn't have any moves as is being opposed by the white king. So let's say the rook will just come behind the pawn just in case the king moves to e8 to be able to take the pawn with check. But from here, white will move the king to d7. After rook to d2 check, the white king will move to e8. And now if the rook comes behind, the pawn will simply push to e7. And after black moves the rook back to e1 and white moves the rook to a2, we've reached the Lucena winning position, which if you're not familiar with, I encourage you to watch that video as well to see how to continue and win this game from here. And coming back after king to d6, if instead of attacking the white king from d1 with check, black is going to move the rook to g6 check. Here, white can simply start pushing the pawn to e6, sheltering from the checks. And now, checkmate is threatened with rook to a8. So here, the black king has to move away with king to f8. After rook to a8 check, the black king will be forced to g7. And now, white can move the king to d7, from which black can retreat the rook to start a series of checks. But after pawn to e7 and rook to d1 check, white can move the king in front of the pawn to e8 and win by the Lucena position. But even easier, the king can get out as the white rook protects the promotion square. And now if black goes behind the pawn will simply promote. And after black takes the queen, the rook will take back and white can win with the king and rook. Or coming back, if black here tries a series of checks, these will eventually run out as the white king will start marching towards the rook. So after something like king to b5, the rook comes to b1 check, king to c4, rook to c1, king to b3, rook to b1, and now king to c2. The checks are stopped. After rook goes behind the pawn, same story, white will promote and will be able to win the game from here. Coming back from the very beginning, I also want to mention that after rook to d3 check, white can move the king to e6, and the winning game from here is going to be very similar as we've seen before. Black only has rook to d8 preventing checkmate on the next move, and after this white simply moves the rook on the other side and then will be able to win the rook. Or the other try by black is moving the king out to f8, which we've also seen after rook to a8 and the king is forced out. White will be able to start marching together with the pawn and then eventually reach the Lucena position and win the game from here. In this next position, it's black to move again, and the pawns are further away, but black here can go ahead and start with the rook to g6 and just wait for white to slowly come down. If white starts with rook to a7 check, black king could go to d8, king to e4, rook to h6. All we have to do is keep that third rank there and we'll be able to achieve an easy draw after that. Pawn to d4, rook to g6, king to e5, rook to h6, pawn to d5, rook to g6. And now the white king cannot go in front of the pawn. After something like king to f5, the rook could simply move to h6. If the king comes back, the rook could even go on the other side. It doesn't matter. All we're waiting is for that pawn push. And as soon as the pawn moves to the 6 file going in front of the king, then we will be able to move the rook behind and start a series of checks. Here, a rook check doesn't do anything as the black king could simply come back to d7. Rook to a7, we just go back to d8. And if the king moves to e6, now we're just going to start the series of checks and the white king will not be able to get away from the checks and a draw will be achieved. If he's going to start marching towards the rook to stop those checks, as soon as the pawn cannot be defended by the king, we could go behind it to attack it. If the rook defends it, the black king will be able to come and attack it. And after some like king to c4, we are going to be able to take that pawn. And now after the rook exchange, this will be a draw. Or if white doesn't exchange and he goes with the check here, we could actually claim this as a draw if you play in a tournament, and the tournament director will have to grant it to you. In this next position, it's black to move again. And here, the black king is not in front of the pawn, and he's being cut off by the rook as the rook takes control of the e file. Well, if the pawn did not reach the 6th rank and the king is behind the pawn, we're actually going to be able to achieve the Philidor position or a draw game if the rook exchange with the move rook to e8. We're going to challenge the rook on this file, and now if the rook exchange, for example rook takes rook and king takes rook, now the white king being behind the pawn is not going to be able to achieve a winning position. After king to g5 check, we are going to be able to move our king to f7, and now if you know how to play with the opposition, you will be able to achieve an easy draw. After f6, king to f8, king to g6, king to g8, pawn to f7 check, we come in front of the pawn, and king to f6 is stalemate. So coming back after rook to e8 challenging the other rook, if the other rook moves away, let's say rook to d2 check, the king will be able to move to e7 going towards the squares in front of the pawn. After rook to e2 check, king to f7. Again, rook takes rook here doesn't work, as we mentioned. After king to g5, we will be able to come to f7 and then reach a drawn position here. And if the rook will move to a2, from here we're simply going to be able to start moving the rook back as the king is behind the pawn, and now we are going to be able to start a series of checks and there's nothing that white can do about it. And this is the last position. As you can see here, the white king is not behind the pawn, but it's next to the pawn. Well, this position is actually lost for black. If black tries to play the same way, let's say rook to e8 challenging the rook, this time white is able to exchange the rooks, because after black takes the rook, the white king is able to reach the square g6, which is a critical square as the pawn is in the opponent's side of the board. And after something like king to f8, white will be able to take the opposition and then promote the pawn from here. And coming back from the beginning, rook to g8 doesn't work either. After that, white will simply move the king to f6. If the rook retreats back, white will be able to march with the king to f7. After attacking the pawn will march. Staying behind the pawn doesn't help. Here white can move the rook to d2 check, moving the king away, and now the white king will be able to move to g7. After rook to g3 check, white will move the king to f8. Rook coming behind the pawn, white will simply push the pawn to f7, and now reaching the Lucena position, white will be able to win. Alright, thank you so much for watching this video. I encourage you to visit my website, masteryourchess.com, where you will be able to practice these positions and many more against the computer. If you liked my video, please subscribe and don't forget to check out my new website, masteryourchess.com, where you can learn, practice, test, and master your chess knowledge.